Welcome to Turn the Page podcast with Alyssa and Leah, a podcast where we share our love of children's literature and help you create page turners.
On today's episode, we'll talk about The Wild Robot. So, The Wild Robot is another New York Times bestseller. This one is for children/young adult books in a series because Wild Robot, though we read the first book, is actually a 3-book series.
Nice.
Yeah. So, after we read Wonder, I was like, Leah, we should read another book together and discuss it because that is one thing we love to do, obviously.
Yes, and we loved Wonder. That was fun.
It was really fun to be able to talk about a book that we both read on the podcast, just because that's something we do in our personal life all the time, through book club. So since we knew Wild Robot was going to become a movie, and we'll talk about this later, but we did go see the movie together, we figured this would be a good one for us to go ahead and read and discuss.
Yes, and when you recommended it, I had never heard of it. I think I had seen like one preview of the movie. So when you mentioned it, I was like, ooh, I kind of know what this is. But this was not on my radar. So
me either until I saw a commercial. So I saw a commercial for Wild Robot, thought it was becoming a movie, and I had seen it when we were looking at New York Times bestsellers.
Okay.
For the series, but the other ones were series that I was very familiar with, like Percy Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it interesting that New York Times bestseller, the children/young adults books in a series, I wish they didn't group them together. I feel like they should have children's series and young adult series.
I agree.
Because Girls Guides to Murder is also on there.
Okay. Yeah.
And though I agree that a teen could read that, that's not a children's book.
No.
So I find it interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we found this one, though.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right. So, Wild Robot, just quick synopsis.
Okay. It's about a robot who gets deserted on a island in a boat crash. Like it was a shipping container. So there's other robots, but she's the only one that survives. And she has to figure out, with no other robots, humans, there's only animals on this island. And she has to kind of figure out like how to live her life.
Yeah. And I feel like it's super relevant in today's world because of, AI and obviously robots one day I'm sure will be a thing. I thought that they would be a thing by now, obviously, not obviously, but when I was a kid, I can remember watching like the Jetsons and things like that, thinking that that's where we would be in this year. So it's definitely relevant.
I would say it's futuristic.
You think it's futuristic?
Oh, yeah, because like on the mainland where there are people, robots are commonplace in households and running things. I would even say like the spacecraft is
the images of the spacecraft.
Yeah, but it's also not flown by human. It's flown by computers. There's no human in it. And then once like she is on the mainland, or even Brightville is, like cars are not.
You're right.
Driven by humans.
It is futuristic, and there is. I just think we could have this technology now. This Rosin robot could absolutely be created today.
Yeah.
And I would also say, like, we're not that far off from some of this, except for maybe human fear holding us back.
Yeah.
I think we could absolutely have robots in farming communities. I would say that in the book, there's some clues that it's in the future too, because when they're flying, when the geese are migrating and they're flying and they have some of the cities that the buildings are in the water.
Yeah.
I think that that's like a nod to like maybe some climate change and that the water has kind of taken over some cities and things.
Yeah.
So it's futuristic, but also you can see.
Not really, because she's by herself on a deserted island. And so it's very, very primitive.
Right. Yes. So this island is.
Yeah.
So I would recommend this book for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
This is not like Wonder.
No.
This is not a book that is relevant for adults, that is in a children's reading level range.
No.
However, this is a great chapter book for a kid in your life.
You can buy this for your children, and I feel like very comfortable with them reading it and not having read it yourself. But absolutely for kids.
Yes, you do not need to read this. This will not necessarily change your life in a way like Wonder will, but it's great for kids. I mean, second through fifth grade,
Yeah, I agree.
perfect. Great read,
Yes.
I think. And also exciting because it's got a movie then at the end that you need to see.
Yes.
So I do recommend it. I think nature loving kids would really like this.
Mm-hmm.
Also, kids that are interested in AI.
Yes, and robotics.
And there's definitely, you could talk a lot about that, about how she adapts and changes and, how that's kind of maybe built into her code as an AI robot.
Yeah.
But then also there's some humanity.
Right. And I think like some kids might know more than me on like this subject of robots. And yeah.
So I would definitely say we have kids that we teach that would have a lot of content knowledge and how AI works and how this like building of AI works.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's a good read. According to the ATOS book scale, which is what Accelerated Reader uses, this book is a 5.1.
And this surprised us
Yes.
because really I would recommend this to second graders at our school. And I think that they would enjoy it. I think fifth graders, just the fifth graders that I know, this might be a little bit juvenile for them. And also just by reading the book, the chapters are really short. There's pictures in it. The like content to me was younger. So a 5.1 surprised me.
I agree. I think the plot of this story is simple.
Yeah.
It is not like Holes is in that same range.
Yeah.
And that plot to me is challenging. So we actually went and we're like, what exactly is this skill looking at? So what it's looking at is average sentence length, average word length, and average word difficulty level. So
I guess maybe the vocabulary could be seen as more rigorous than some second grade level books. And so that might be it. However, I don't think it's out of the realm of second grade knowledge. I really don't.
I would say maybe an above level second grader, because a lot of the second graders you're probably thinking of are kids we've taught in the gifted program.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe third grade. A traditional third grader could read this book, I would say, and understand the.
But I think, yeah.
I think there are second graders out there that could definitely read it, but there may be your above level second
maybe
grader.
So. Yeah.
And if
third grade might be a sweet spot.
Third grade problem. Yeah. And if they can read the words, they can definitely understand the plot. Because sometimes we have students, and we can remember this when we used to like give reading tests, that can like read the words, but they cannot understand the story. And in some leveling systems, that is what keeps them at the level they're at.
Right. Absolutely.
So if you have a kid that's pretty good at decoding in second grade, they could definitely understand this plot.
Yeah. So let's get into it. But what did you think? Like, who are your favorite characters, or like, did you identify with?
So
characters.
My favorite characters were the moms in the book, obviously, because I identify with that. And I just found it, trying not to talk about the movie at all right now. So in the book, Roz becomes a mom to Fredville.
Yes. A gosling that she accidentally falls on their nest and picks up this egg that survived and becomes its mother.
Yes. And so it imprints on her.
Yes.
And she doesn't necessarily want to be its mother.
Or knows really even what a mother is. Like, she's...
Right. But she wants to help. Yeah. That is her programming, is to help. Yeah. So she gets help from other mothers along the way, like Pinktail, and there's a Gosling mother that gives her advice. And there was one quote that I read today, and I wish I could remember the exact wording, but it was something to the effect of like, no one knows how to be a mother. You just do the best you can.
Yeah.
And that to me was really heartwarming because that's exactly how it is for you, a mother too.
Yeah.
One would think, you just know,
Uh-huh.
but you just do the best you can. And, you have that programming, obviously, but
Yeah.
her programming was to help, which made her a pretty good mom, even though she didn't necessarily know how to teach Bright Bill how to swim. She was able to get help from other Gosling mothers,
Mhm.
and then also like Longneck, who is the leader of the Goslings, helps her to kind of teach him what he's going to need to know to migrate.
Mhm.
And so those were my favorite characters, even though he's not a mom, but
Yeah.
that the people that along the way that helped her to be able to help him,
Yeah.
that's who I
Yeah.
resonated with. What about you?
Of course, I loved Roz. She's like the main character, the robot. But I thought that the animal characters were just like funny, and her interactions with them, like she observes a lot. So she learns kind of like how to speak to these animals, but they just have like funny interactions. And I thought that that was really cute. Um, Yeah, the characters are fun.
The characters are really fun, and I thought it's cool because the animals are talking in the book, obviously,
Mm.
but they're not talking in English like maybe a more juvenile chapter book would. Roz, with her intelligence from her observations,
Mhm.
is able to learn the language of the animals.
Yeah, yeah,
And I find that to be a really cool thing because it still lets you have those interactions with animals,
yeah,
but then it isn't like the animals are talking. They're normal animals and they've always been talking,
yeah,
but
to each other, yeah,
yeah, and they're
yeah. And there's, like, different characters too, like, you have the bears who are at first, like, they don't get along, so you have, like, conflict in there too that's just interesting, and I would imagine, like, this it's pretty realistic, like, not realistic, but the relationships, I guess I'm saying, like, her navigating, like, getting to know people or
yeah.
animals in this case, but
Because at first they think that she is a monster because she is unnatural. She's
yeah,
like unlike anything they've ever seen
yeah,
before.
yeah,
The opening scene with the otters
yeah,
is so cute to
yeah.
me. So the otters are one of the only animals I would say at first that are not afraid of her.
Well, yeah, they just have all these, like, crashed boxes that they're just, like, exploring, and
Yeah.
yeah,
And the otters are so playful. So they're the ones that accidentally turn Roz on initially. And then the other animals are very wary of her, obviously, at first
yeah,
and don't like her. And I feel like in the story, you can tell they don't necessarily want to accept her. But then when they see her with Bright Veil, who is forced to accept her and he doesn't know better,
yeah.
uh, they kind of come around. And then eventually in the winter, they need
Right,
Roz.
yeah, and I feel like a lot of learning takes place getting to know how they get to know each other, so, like, she has to be understanding and accepting, and so do the animals, so there's a lot of, like, just relationship building.
Yeah. And then there's like the truces. Like the animals in the
Mhm.
beginning of the book have like this thing that they call the dawn truce. So
Yeah,
it's like an hour in the morning when none of the animals eat each other
yeah,
and end up using a truce later in the story when they're all going to live in this cabin
yeah.
together because Roz doesn't want anyone.
'Cause they're freezing, so, yeah. So and I will say this, which I thought was kinda cool, and I think kids would think that this is cool too. There is a lot of, like, just, like, matter of fact, this happens in nature, like, the animals were freezing to death
Yeah.
in the winter, and so, like, it's kind of like and I think kids will think, "Oh, like, this is kinda cool," and I think they naturally think that nature is intriguing, So, like, and the death of the animals when she falls on them, it's just kind of like, it's it is what happens.
Right. There even is a part
So
they go in the winter house and it talks about how they leave during the day,
yeah,
but there's no violence inside of the winter hut.
yeah,
But
it's so they
sometimes once they
come
leave,
back. Yeah,
it's overturned and it's a little
yeah,
awkward.
yeah. So, I think that's interesting.
Me too. And I think kids would enjoy that.
Yeah.
I mean, all the characters were really good characters. And I found it interesting that, the bears kind of have a redemption arc.
Yes.
At the beginning, they do not like Roz. They actually actively fight her. They're one
Try
of
to kill her, yeah.
the causes of her first injuries
Yeah.
that make her no longer a shiny
She's
new
interest
robot.
yeah.
And then at the end, when Roz is getting attacked by the robots that have come to collect her,
Yeah.
the bears end up being one of her biggest saving forces
Right.
because they're so strong and they're able to fight
Yeah.
against these other robots. So,
There's a lot that happens in this book. Now that we're talking about it, I'm just, like, remembering, like, just from the beginning, her learning how to live, and then, like, her journey through motherhood with Bright Bill, and then, like, him leaving and coming back, and then because he migrates, so she's by herself for the winter, and so then when he comes back, and then, like, she robots come to, like, repossess her basically because they found that there was a robot living, like,
on the
on the island, and so the company sends for her, to repossess her and fix her or collect her, and so, like, there's a lot, I mean, that
yeah, and
happens, yeah.
while he's away during the winter, they also have how she builds the hut and the
Yeah,
hut
yeah,
burns down. They have that fire and then they have to rebuild
yeah.
for all the animals to stay. And she forms really good relationships
Mhm.
with the animals who initially are not her friends, throughout them kind of meeting her and her being helpful to them.
Yeah.
So one thing we did find on Hachette, who is the publisher of this book, they had a really good guide to kind of have some book discussions with your child. Uh Now, as a teacher, I would definitely recommend don't just go down this list and be like, number one,
Right.
make it like more of an authentic conversation. But we did just want to pick one for us to kind of talk about.
And not for parents who are not reading this book, it kinda gives them a little bit insight of just, like, discussion questions, what you can ask your child.
Absolutely. It even has like major themes of the book, which I'll say, like, compared to Wonder, this book, it has a lot of themes, but it's not
Yes.
as much like the theme of this book is kindness.
Right.
So, they have a bunch of different themes listed, like survival, friendship, family, motherhood, adoption. Sorry, I thought it said adaptation, because I would say that's also a theme, like
Mhm.
learning to adapt.
Yeah.
Nature versus technology, conservation, bullying, belonging. So different themes that you could talk about. Even forgiveness is listed as a theme, which I think we kind of hit on that, like with the bears.
Yeah.
And even at the beginning, one of the goslings says, like, I think that he's a runt, so he probably won't survive.
Mhm.
And then seeing them accept Bright Bill when he comes back, even though he maybe wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for Roz, is really cool. Uh, but here's a question we're going to talk about. It's number 8 on this discussion list. But thinking about a purpose, Roz muses, perhaps I am simply meant to help others. How does Roz go from asking for help in the beginning to being a helper? How is asking for help an act of courage, and how is it means for survival? What do you think might be your purpose in life?
Very thought provoking. So I would say that like Roz definitely goes from not knowing, just waking up and just having like no idea of her surroundings, and she stumbles through it, and the animals are not helpful. Like she's stumbling, but they're also like causing her stumbles. Like they're not accepting. So she's kind of navigating on her own, and I think it's not until like she actually has Bright Bill that she asks for any help or at all, and it's not just for herself, it's for him. So, um and it isn't easy for her. She's not sure even how to do it, and it's not easy, so I do think it took a lot of courage.
Yeah, and I think it, like, hits on the point that, like, she is meant to be helpful. Roz is meant to be helpful,
Yes.
and she is helpful, but when she's asking people how she can help them, she doesn't really get to help them.
No.
It takes her, like, finding a situation where she can be helpful, and then, obviously, later, even sometimes the animals did not want her help initially, but then they need her help, so it does take courage to ask, and it takes courage to admit that you don't know what
Mhm.
she has to do
Yeah.
with, as you said, like, raising Bright Bill. She
Yeah.
doesn't know how to parent a gosling.
Yeah.
So even wanting to be helpful.
And I think we do talk about this in schools, like, with growth mindset. When you're trying to do something and it's not working out, sometimes you do need to ask for help. And it's not always easy, but asking for help is the right thing to do sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe not like your first thing, like try to do something,
Yeah.
try and figure it out. But like I'm always reminding kids, like, I am here to help you. So if
Mhm.
you are unable to complete a task, like, I want to help you. I
Yeah.
want you to ask me for help,
Yeah.
especially if you can specifically ask. Like, she didn't know how to teach him how to fly.
Yeah.
Of course she didn't. She's a robot. Like, she never done that before.
Yeah.
Um, she finds her purpose through a situation that isn't great.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't necessarily want it. But I think that's often how you find your purpose. It's not just like what you think is going to be
Yeah.
your purpose in life. It's so much more complex than that. And I think a lot of kids sometimes have like a really simple answer to that, like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be this. But yeah, so this, we'll post this in the show notes, the book club guide. It's got some great questions about the book, and I definitely think it's a good read. And okay, one thing I found really shocking when I was reading the author's note about this book, where it talks about his idea
Yeah.
for a robot. He had been like sketching, and he was always into nature, and he just drew this robot. And Peter Brown is by trade an illustrator. He's illustrated other books, and he illustrated a book that I have been reading lately. I thought he wrote it for a second, but he illustrated creepy carrots and a creepy pair of underwear, which are by Aaron Reynolds, which are hilarious. The rabbit starts eating the carrots and the carrots stalk him. So I find
Yeah.
it funny that he has been an illustrator of this is also a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
So I found it funny that he was the illustrator of these books.
Yeah.
And then he wrote his own New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. I loved that author's note. So at the end of this book, it's like a behind the scenes, and it shows kind of how the wild robot came to be. He talks about how he was just like sketching like in nature and a robot, and that's how this story like happened. That's how he thought of it. And I think that this is really great to point out to kids, and it could be very inspiring to young readers.
Yeah.
And I actually I teach this with my curriculum. We read the author's notes of books, and my class just wrote their own story and we published it, meaning like we wrote it on pages and put it in a book. And some of them had a leftover page, and they asked like, "Can we make an author's note or about the author?"
Aw.
And I was like, my teacher heart just like grew 3 sizes. I was like, "Yes, of course you can make an author's note." But I love that, and I think that this one could be very inspiring,
Yes, I agree.
how this came to be.
I agree, especially because he didn't draw the robot with the intent to make a book. It kind
Yeah,
of evolved over a long
yeah,
time. And so I think that's really cool. And he obviously was very accomplished. He won the Caldecott for Creepy Carrots, and
yeah,
that's an illustrating award.
yeah,
So like he didn't need to go write his own book, but how great that he did.
yeah,
So, and he also, one cool thing about today is authors being involved on social media because he
yes,
shared with me his post. So we went and saw the movie.
Yeah, let's talk about the movie.
The movie
It's great.
was great, but it was so different from the book.
It was very different.
I, as a reader, when I read a book first, when I go see the movie, I love a movie that exactly mirrors the book.
Right. That's what we all want, I think. And we were very surprised after watching this movie that it really was a different story almost. Same characters, I would say like same underlying meaning.
Yes.
However, like the events were very different. And that was surprising to us.
I would say even character development.
Yeah.
So like Fink was in the book.
Yeah.
But I was like,
Not at all.
is he a main character? Do I just not remember it right? And she's like, no, he was one of the animal characters, but he's no bigger of a character. I mean, in the book, your main characters are Roz and Brightbill.
And also though, like the relationship between Roz and this gosling that she adopts, Brightbill, in the book is, I would say, a lot more than what it was in the movie. Like when he goes off for his migration, they are both heartbroken that they have to separate. And in the movie, they were at odds with each other when he went out.
Right. So like even like he almost went back to tell her
goodbye or something, but he didn't. Yeah. Yeah. So it was very and that was kind of odd just because we knew, the story from before. So the movie is very different. You definitely I mean, it's okay if your kid doesn't read the book and goes watch them. It's a different movie.
Yeah. I also think so. This is where I was going with this social media post. You shared with me the post, and he said in the post that he was totally fine with the different adaptation because they each have the same themes.
Yeah.
However, it is so different that you could see the movie and then read the book or vice versa, because even though the themes are going to be the same, it is a different experience.
Yeah.
I preferred the book, and especially because of their relationship. Like that kind of earned me in the movie that they were not close really. And Ross was a mother to Brightbill, and Brightbill appreciated that, and Brightbill knew that in the book. And in the movie, I didn't really find that.
He didn't. Like that was one of the conflicts. Like he did not appreciate her as his adopted mother. Like when he found out what happened, they kind of like were at odds with each other. And she also looked at being in the movie, she looked at being a mother as her task to complete, and in the book that was something she wanted to do. It wasn't like just a task to her. It was like she loved him.
I guess so in the book, it's easier to like have an internal conflict in a book than it is a movie. Because in the book, I'm saying more of the conflict is internal in Roz, that like she's going against her programming because she is really falling in love with this Gosling in this community, and she doesn't necessarily care about completing tasks as much. Like she's helpful in a new and different way.
Yeah.
And so that's hard to translate into a movie. So I could see why it had to change, but I didn't love that change. And then also the end, I'm really confused if there's going to be a second movie, how it's going to be, because the end of the book and the end of the movie are very different.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this might be just like a standalone movie for the Wild Robot, because like the next part was not the same. However, this whole movie wasn't the same, so it could be just a different continuation of the story, which would be fine too. But yeah, if you're looking for let's read this book and watch the movie and compare, it's gonna be totally different.
Yeah, a lot of
that.
Yeah. Your Venn diagram, the middle part is very small.
But yeah,
I think too, like this is a spoiler. So if you do intend to be surprised by the end, just skip ahead a little bit. The end of the book was the super selfless move for Roz.
Right.
Because she really does not want to leave the island,
No.
but she also doesn't want to put the animals and Brightbill in danger.
Yeah.
So she chooses to leave on an unmanned ship
Yes.
because all the other robots are dead.
Yeah.
Except for her. Um, she chooses to leave so that she saves their community. And then the last line in the book, which I didn't notice this till after, but I thought it's on a page all by itself. And it says she would find her way back home.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think that that is so powerful because it's like she's a mom and she's a big part of this community and she is going to fight to get back there,
Yeah.
but she's leaving because she knows she has to for them.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the same vibes from the
she definitely left in the movie under the same premise of like the Rico robots told her will always come for you, like they'll never leave you alone, they're always going to look for you. So she knew that they were going to be in danger again, but it was kind of like I don't know, she wasn't like I'm going to come back home.
right.
She left and was like going to be okay with that
Yeah.
new life for herself. But in the book, yeah, it was definitely always her plan to go like get fixed because she was broken
Yeah.
and, figure out a way to come back home and be with her new family.
Yes, absolutely. And I felt like
So this robot definitely became self-aware.
yeah, she did become self-aware for sure. I feel like the animals were so much more upset in the movie than her.
Yeah.
And they were upset in the book,
Yeah.
but in a different way. They understood. They
Yeah.
kind of come to terms. But it's a good read. I think
It
that
is. It's a fun read.
yeah, you should. Your kids would probably like this.
Put it in your teachers, put it in your library. Yeah, parents. Yeah, especially because they are seeing it. Like, I took my cousin when we went to see it, and she had seen the preview, so she knew what was going on. So, like, they're seeing it right now, so it's relevant, and I think that they would be excited to read it.
Absolutely, yeah. Her mom was like, "It's so cute, the gosling." That was her. Of course.
She wanted to see the animals. Yeah.
So it is thought provoking if you like get into the discussion about it. I would say reading the book at times I was just like, oh wow, is this how all kids' books are? Because it's simple. It's
Right.
not always tugging on your heartstrings.
No, and that's okay. That's okay too.
I agree. I think that
I don't need to find the meaning of life in every book.
right.
Our our purpose in life, in every book, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. I would read the next one in the series for sure.
Me too. Oh, and I do want to say that I listened to the first part of this book, and then I bought the book and I read the second half, and I preferred reading this book. I liked looking at the illustrations, and I enjoyed the second half of this book way more than I did the first. And I think it was because I was reading it.
And yeah, I think maybe for me that was what it was at first too, because the audiobook does come with illustrations, but then I was not referring
Look
back
at that while you're listening. Yeah.
And so I do think it was cool in the book how there are illustrations, especially because that is what Peter Brown does
Yeah.
so well. And yeah, I don't think Roz of the movie is the same Roz. I would like a little clunkier. But she survived many things. She's definitely a very sturdy robot because she went through some stuff on the island. But yeah, it was a great book. I definitely recommend it. I think it's a good book for animal lovers, robot lovers, and just somebody looking for a new read. All right.
What's making you turn the page, Alyssa?
What is making me turn the page right now is still Halloween books. So we are reading a lot of Halloween books. I brought home all my Halloween books. I set up a little display in the girls' room of Halloween books.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been reading multiple Halloween books every night. So that has been really fun for our family. And just listening to the girls. Olivia has really started a lot of like pretending to read. which is cool to see her kind of know how stories start. She'll be like, one day, and then she'll just say random things.
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of Halloween reading around our house. What
Yeah.
about you?
I like that. So we have started a new unit at school. We finished reading about books and how books change lives, and we're starting our animal unit, which is really fun for me because kids are really into animals.
Yes.
And so I'm excited to introduce this to kids and start reading some nonfiction books about animals.
Yeah, I love animals to do some more nonfiction work too,
Yeah.
because it is sometimes kids don't love nonfiction,
Right.
but they do usually like it about animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very easy topic.
Thank you for listening to Turn the Page podcast with Alyssa and Leah. Please take a minute to follow us and leave us a review on whatever app you are listening to us on. We would love to hear from you.
Speaking of hearing from you, we would love for you to follow along with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram or TikTok at turn the page_podcast or turn the page podcast on Facebook. Every Wednesday, we do What You Read in Wednesday, and we would love to add to our TBR. So please drop us some suggestions. If you have read The Wild Robot, we would also love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So let us know what you thought. Bye, y'all.